America is home to over 14 million undocumented immigrants, a shadow nation powering its economy from the fields to the factories. They generate more than $100 billion in annual spending power and contribute nearly $12 billion in state and local taxes, yet most live paycheck to paycheck, invisible to the system they sustain. From California's $50 billion farms to Florida's $8 billion tourism engines, these workers harvest the food, build the homes, and clean the cities millions depend on daily. This is the untold story of the 10 U.S. states where undocumented immigrants keep the American dream alive, without recognition and without rest. Number 10. Washington. Washington state might be known for its rain, coffee, and tech titans like Microsoft and Amazon, but behind that glossy skyline lies a quieter, essential workforce, one that often goes unseen. As of 2025, an estimated 300,000 undocumented immigrants live in Washington, making up nearly 4% of the state's total population. They power the backbone of industries that keep the evergreen state running: agriculture, construction, food processing, and logistics. In the Yakima Valley alone, roughly 1 in every 3 farm workers is believed to be undocumented. The region's fruit industry, worth over $4.6 billion annually, depends heavily on migrant labor to harvest apples, cherries, and hops. Yet many of these workers earn barely $15 to $18 per hour, often with no health insurance or job security. Housing for these workers can cost around $1,200 a month, even in rural counties, consuming nearly half of their income. In cities like Seattle and Tacoma, undocumented residents fill critical roles in construction, cleaning, and restaurant services. Despite Washington's high minimum wage, $16.28 per hour, the highest statewide rate in the U.S., living costs remain staggering. A single-bedroom apartment in Seattle averages $2,200 a month, putting even legal residents under strain. For undocumented workers, that figure can mean shared apartments or living outside city limits entirely. Washington's sanctuary state policy, passed in 2019, continues to shield undocumented residents from local immigration enforcement, providing limited access to driver's licenses and healthcare programs. Still, many live under constant fear of deportation or job loss. Public estimates suggest that undocumented immigrants contribute over $1.2 billion annually in state and local taxes, yet receive minimal benefits in return. Politically, Washington maintains a more compassionate approach compared to southern states, but it's not without tension. Rising housing costs, income inequality, and debates over border policy have sharpened local divisions. Still, in agricultural towns and urban restaurants alike, the state's economy simply wouldn't function without this invisible workforce. From the apple orchards of Yakima to the kitchens of Seattle, undocumented labor has become an inseparable, if unacknowledged, pillar of Washington's prosperity. Number 9. Massachusetts. Massachusetts might be synonymous with Harvard, biotech, and revolutionary history, but behind its high-earning economy lies a quiet labor force that keeps its service, construction, and healthcare sectors alive. Around 320,000 undocumented immigrants now call Massachusetts home, roughly 4.5% of the state's total population. Many of them live in and around Boston, Worcester, and Lawrence, cities where immigrant communities have been rooted for decades. The state's labor market is brutal for newcomers. The average rent for a one-bedroom apartment in Boston exceeds $2,900 a month, while the median household income sits near $97,000, a figure far out of reach for many undocumented workers earning $15 to $20 an hour in kitchens, delivery services, and cleaning jobs. Still, their impact on the local economy is undeniable. According to the Massachusetts Taxpayers Foundation, undocumented immigrants contribute over $400 million annually in state and local taxes, despite being excluded from most federal benefits. Massachusetts' sanctuary policies have provided limited protection. The Work and Family Mobility Act, enacted in 2023, now allows undocumented residents to obtain driver's licenses, a major step towards safety and economic participation. But daily challenges remain. Healthcare access is restricted, and fear of immigration enforcement keeps many from seeking help or reporting abuse. In sectors like healthcare and elder care, Massachusetts quietly relies on immigrant caregivers. Roughly 1 in 5 home health aides in the state are foreign-born, many without legal status. Meanwhile, construction and food processing industries, particularly in central Massachusetts, depend on undocumented workers to fill persistent labor shortages. Ironically, these are the same workers who often face exploitative conditions and unpredictable pay. Even in a progressive state like Massachusetts, the cost of living crisis bites hardest for those without papers. Groceries that once cost $100 a week now exceed $160, while utilities and transport eat into already thin budgets. Yet, these families persist, building lives, raising U.S.-born children, and paying taxes in silence. In a state celebrated for innovation and education, undocumented residents are the invisible laborers keeping that dream running, unseen, underpaid, and indispensable. Number 8. Georgia. Georgia has become the beating heart of the modern South. Booming cities, massive logistics hubs, and non-stop construction. But that growth depends on a workforce that's largely invisible, roughly 340,000 undocumented immigrants, according to recent estimates. They make up nearly 3% of Georgia's population, powering industries from poultry plants to highway construction. Atlanta alone is home to tens of thousands of undocumented workers who keep its economy moving, driving delivery trucks, cleaning office towers, and working in restaurants that feed the city's 6 million residents. Outside the metro, Georgia's vast poultry industry, one of the largest in the U.S., relies heavily on undocumented labor. Poultry exports bring in over $4.2 billion a year, and many of the hands behind that figure belong to workers earning barely $13 to $16 an hour. Housing costs have surged. In Atlanta, average rent for a modest 2-bedroom apartment sits near $1,800, while food and gas prices have jumped 25% since 2020. For undocumented families surviving on low wages, that means constant trade-offs between bills, rent, and sending money home. Yet despite hardship, they contribute over $900 million annually in state and local taxes, according to the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy. Georgia doesn't have official sanctuary protections, and immigration enforcement can be aggressive in rural counties. Still, cities like Atlanta have adopted informal don't ask policies, allowing undocumented residents to live with relative safety. Schools quietly serve thousands of children from mixed-status families, many of whom dream of becoming the first in their households to graduate college. What's striking is Georgia's duality, a conservative state that depends deeply on undocumented labor. Without these workers, farms would lose harvests, construction projects would stall, and restaurants would struggle to survive. Whether it's building high-rises in Atlanta or picking onions in Vidalia, undocumented immigrants are the silent architects of Georgia's growth. They're not just part of the economy, they are the economy. Number 7. North Carolina. In North Carolina, where tobacco fields have given way to industrial farms and modern cities, the immigrant story is one of endurance. Around 360,000 undocumented immigrants live here, roughly 3.3% of the state's total population, and their fingerprints are on nearly every industry that keeps the Tar Heel state alive. Agriculture remains a cornerstone. The state produces more than $13 billion in crops and livestock annually, and much of that workforce is undocumented. From harvesting sweet potatoes and tobacco to working in poultry processing plants, these workers often endure grueling 12-hour shifts for $14 to $17 an hour, sometimes without proper safety equipment. In rural counties like Duplin or Sampson, immigrants make up over 40% of the labor force in major processing facilities. Urban areas tell a different story. In cities like Charlotte, Raleigh, and Greensboro, undocumented workers dominate sectors such as construction, landscaping, hospitality, and food service. Yet the cost of living continues to rise. Average rent in Charlotte now exceeds $1,700 a month, while inflation has driven grocery costs up more than 20% since 2020. For families earning less than $30,000 annually, every dollar is stretched to its breaking point. Despite North Carolina's lack of formal sanctuary protections, local communities have formed informal networks to help immigrants survive. Nonprofits offering legal aid, churches providing food and language classes, and schools quietly supporting undocumented students. Many have lived here for 10 to 20 years, raising American-born children who speak fluent English and call North Carolina home. Economically, the impact is enormous. Undocumented residents contribute an estimated $900 million in state and local taxes each year. Yet, political rhetoric often paints them as burdens rather than the laborers sustaining the state's booming growth. In truth, North Carolina's prosperity, from its booming tech parks to its suburban sprawl, would falter without them. They pick the food, build the homes, clean the offices, and serve in restaurants across the state. They may live in the shadows, but their labor keeps the lights on. Number 6. New York. New York has long been the gateway to the American dream, and for over 410,000 undocumented immigrants, it still represents hope, survival, and opportunity. From the Bronx to Buffalo, these residents form the invisible engine that keeps the Empire State moving. While politicians debate policy in Albany or Washington, immigrants clean hotel rooms, cook meals, build skyscrapers, and care for the elderly, quietly sustaining one of the largest economies on Earth. New York City alone is home to nearly 70% of the state's undocumented population. They work across vital sectors: hospitality, transportation, construction, and home health care. The median household income among undocumented families here hovers near $39,000, less than half the city's median of $75,000. Yet, the cost of living has exploded. Rent for a one-bedroom apartment in NYC averages $3,200 a month. Groceries are up 23% since 2020, and public transit fares continue to rise. For those earning low wages under the table, survival often means sharing rooms, skipping healthcare, and relying on community aid. Despite hardship, New York remains one of the few states actively supporting undocumented residents. Programs like the Excluded Workers Fund, a $2.1 billion initiative launched in 2021, provided relief to over 130,000 undocumented workers who were excluded from federal COVID aid. Additionally, the NYSDREAM Act allows undocumented students to access state financial aid for college, a rare opportunity in the nation. Economically, their contribution is staggering. Undocumented immigrants in New York pay an estimated $1.1 billion annually in state and local taxes. They fill labor gaps across industries struggling with shortages, especially healthcare and construction. In simple terms, without them, New York's economy would collapse under its own weight. Yet even in a state built by immigrants, fear lingers. Rising housing costs, political polarization, and labor exploitation make daily life precarious. Still, from the subways to the skyline, their fingerprints are everywhere. The dream that once began on Ellis Island now continues in quiet kitchens and crowded apartments, built by hands that may never hold citizenship, but have built the city that defines it. Number 5. Illinois. Illinois, anchored by the powerhouse city of Chicago, is home to roughly 420,000 undocumented immigrants, a community woven deeply into the state's labor force. From the skyscrapers downtown to the meatpacking plants of Aurora and the farms of Kankakee, these workers are the backbone of an economy that generates over $1 trillion in annual GDP. Most undocumented residents live in the Chicago metropolitan area, where they make up around 7% of the total labor force. Their roles span construction, hospitality, cleaning, and food production. The average hourly wage among undocumented workers sits near $16, compared to the state's average of $31. In a city where median rent has reached $2,100 per month, survival means long hours, side jobs, and often living several families to a single apartment. Despite limited protections, Illinois remains one of the more immigrant-friendly states. It provides access to health care through the Illinois Health Benefits for Immigrant Adults (HBIA) program, and allows undocumented residents to obtain driver's licenses. The state's Trust Act restricts local police from cooperating with federal immigration authorities, giving some sense of stability to mixed-status families. Economically, the contributions are immense. According to state data, undocumented immigrants in Illinois pay about $1.4 billion annually in state and local taxes. They represent an estimated 6% of the total consumer spending in the Chicago region, injecting billions into housing, food, and transportation sectors. Yet, they remain vulnerable to exploitation, often working in unsafe conditions for low pay, with little recourse if abused. Chicago's sanctuary status offers symbolic protection, but inflation and crime have made life harder. Grocery costs have risen 21% since 2020, and utilities are up nearly 30%. For undocumented families, those increases can mean skipping meals or sharing housing to survive. Still, their presence defines Illinois' identity: hardworking, diverse, and resilient. From cleaning high-rises in downtown Chicago to planting cornfields in central Illinois, undocumented immigrants are not guests in this state's story. They are its foundation. Number 4. New Jersey. Despite its small size, New Jersey holds one of the highest densities of undocumented immigrants in America. Nearly 490,000 residents, or about 5.2% of the state's population. Its proximity to New York City, booming service industries, and established immigrant communities have made it both a landing zone and long-term home for many seeking stability. The majority live in northern counties, Hudson, Bergen, and Essex, where immigrants are integral to daily life. From construction and transportation to food service and domestic work, undocumented labor fuels the state's $700 billion economy. In cities like Newark, Paterson, and Elizabeth, they make up an estimated 1 in every 10 workers. The average undocumented household earns around $45,000 per year, yet faces rent averaging $2,000 to $2,500 for a modest apartment. Despite their status, undocumented immigrants in New Jersey contribute more than $1.1 billion annually in state and local taxes. Many also own small businesses, restaurants, auto repair shops, and cleaning services that employ others in the same community. These enterprises not only generate income, but form cultural and economic lifelines for entire neighborhoods. The state has taken notable progressive steps. New Jersey grants driver's licenses regardless of immigration status, provides access to state financial aid for undocumented students, and has multiple sanctuary policies limiting cooperation with ICE. However, life remains precarious. Healthcare costs are crushing. A single urgent care visit can cost $250 to $400, and most undocumented residents lack insurance. Inflation has driven basic food costs up nearly 25% since 2021, while gas and utilities remain among the highest in the nation. Still, hope persists. Generations of immigrant families have transformed New Jersey's cities into thriving cultural mosaics. From Dominican-owned bodegas to Filipino restaurants and Mexican construction crews, their influence is everywhere. These undocumented residents may not appear in census counts, but their impact on the state's growth, diversity, and resilience is undeniable. Without them, the Garden State wouldn't grow, in any sense of the word. Number 3. Florida. Florida looks like paradise. Palm trees, ocean breeze, and year-round sunshine. But beneath the postcard perfection lies a labor force that quietly sustains the state's booming economy. Nearly 590,000 undocumented immigrants call Florida home, forming the backbone of industries like construction, agriculture, and hospitality, the very sectors that keep the state running and tourists smiling. In Miami-Dade, Collier, and Hillsborough counties, undocumented workers make up as much as 10% of the total workforce. They harvest tomatoes and oranges worth over $8 billion annually, clean luxury hotels, and rebuild cities after hurricanes strike. Yet, despite their indispensable role, their average wages hover around $13 to $17 per hour, barely enough to cover rent in a state where the average one-bedroom apartment now costs $2,000 per month. Florida's economy thrives on their labor. the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy, estimates that undocumented immigrants contribute more than $1.2 billion annually in state and local taxes. But new legislation, including Senate Bill 1718, passed in 2023, has made life increasingly difficult. The law penalizes employers, restricts healthcare access, and forces hospitals to ask about immigration status, creating widespread fear even among long-term residents. Still, they stay. Some have lived in Florida for 20 years, raising American-born children and buying homes under mixed-status families. Others continue sending money home. Over $1 billion in remittances flow from Florida to Latin America annually. And despite crackdowns, demand for their labor remains unstoppable. After Hurricane Ian in 2022, undocumented crews rebuilt entire neighborhoods while official contractors waited for permits. Florida's story is one of contradiction, a state that markets freedom and growth, yet relies on the invisible hands it refuses to acknowledge. These workers are the ones picking fruit under 100-degree heat, serving food to tourists, and constructing the condos that define its skyline. Without them, Florida's paradise would grind to a halt. Number 2. Texas. Everything's bigger in Texas: the land, the economy, and yes, the immigrant population. With an estimated 2.1 million undocumented residents, Texas hosts the second-largest unauthorized population in the nation, accounting for nearly 15% of the U.S. total. From the oil fields of Midland to the construction zones of Dallas, undocumented workers are as much a part of Texas as the cattle and highways. The economic impact is massive. These residents contribute roughly $4.6 billion in state and local taxes every year and generate an estimated $115 billion in annual spending power. In industries like construction and agriculture, undocumented workers make up over 30% of the labor force. Houston's skyline, Austin's booming tech campuses, and the endless rows of suburban housing all have been built, cleaned, and maintained by them. Yet Texas remains one of the toughest states for immigrants. State officials frequently clash with federal authorities over border enforcement, leading to policies that intensify fear and instability. Many undocumented residents earn around $15 to $18 per hour, but live in cities where rents have jumped over 40% since 2020. Houston's median rent now sits at $1,550, and Austin's averages $1,950. Despite the tension, most have deep roots. Roughly 60% of Texas's undocumented adults have lived in the U.S. for over a decade, many raising children who are American citizens. They work in construction, manufacturing, trucking, and food services, jobs the state's massive economy can't function without. Ironically, while politicians campaign on border security, Texas's business sector quietly depends on immigrant labor to keep growing. Without them, crops would rot, roads would remain unfinished, and entire industries would face collapse. Texas embodies America's immigration paradox, a state fiercely protective of its borders, yet utterly dependent on the people who cross them. Number 1. California. California, the world's fifth-largest economy, stands as both the dream and the dilemma of immigration in America. Home to roughly 2.6 million undocumented immigrants, it accounts for nearly 1 in 5 of all unauthorized residents nationwide. From the Central Valley's farms to Silicon Valley's startups, they are the invisible backbone of a state that feeds the nation and drives its innovation. Agriculture alone tells the story. California produces over $50 billion in crops annually, and an estimated 60% of its farm workers are undocumented. In Fresno, Bakersfield, and Salinas, these workers often labor 10-hour days under scorching heat for $14 to $17 an hour, without benefits or job security. Meanwhile, in cities like Los Angeles and San Jose, undocumented residents work in hospitality, manufacturing, cleaning, and construction, roles essential to keeping California's trillion-dollar economy functioning. Living here, however, comes at a price. Median rent statewide has surpassed $2,700 per month, and groceries are up 25% since 2020. Many undocumented families live in overcrowded conditions, pooling resources to survive. Despite hardship, their economic contribution is unmatched. They pay roughly $8 billion in state and local taxes annually and spend more than $80 billion each year in California's economy. The state has implemented some of the nation's most immigrant-friendly policies: access to driver's licenses, healthcare programs for undocumented adults, and tuition aid for undocumented students under the California Dream Act. Yet, even in this progressive environment, rising housing costs, inflation, and anti-immigrant rhetoric have taken a toll. California's identity has always been tied to migration, from the gold rush to modern tech booms. Today, its undocumented residents represent both struggle and resilience, the hands that pick the nation's food, build its homes, and care for its families. They live in the shadows of wealth, but without them, California's golden glow would fade fast.